Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vitor Gonçalves from CITED and the Polytechnic Institute of Bragança in Portugal, and I am presenting this work in co-authorship with Leila Santos from the Federal University of Santa Maria in Brazil. Our paper focuses on a question we consider both urgent and still insufficiently explored. How can artificial intelligence be placed, and indeed must be placed, at the service of inclusion and accessibility for students with disabilities in the context of vocational and technical education and higher education? This is ongoing research with data collected at UFSM at the end of 2025, and it represents a first portrait of a reality that urgently needs to change. Let us begin with the problem. Despite the institutional advances of recent decades, the inclusion of students with disabilities continues to face obstacles that go far beyond physical barriers. We are talking about communication barriers, pedagogical limitations, and a technological divide that persists and, in many cases, is widening. Data from Portuguese and Brazilian higher education institutions make for sobering reading. Dropout rates among students with disabilities consistently exceed the general average. And the reasons identified are consistent across both contexts: insufficient digital accessibility and inadequate pedagogical support. We have organized these challenges around three dimensions. First, physical barriers, infrastructures that still do not guarantee full access. Second, communication gaps, encompassing both linguistic and pedagogical challenges, where teachers do not always have the tools or training to respond to diversity. And third, the technology divide, a low uptake of digital assistive technologies that should be one of the most immediate and accessible responses available, yet remains severely underutilized. It is precisely here that artificial intelligence can play a strategic role, if adopted critically and intentionally. To contextualize where we currently stand, it is worth understanding how AI has evolved within the educational landscape. We identify three phases. The first, between 2021 and 2023, was the phase of reactive AI, dominated by chatbots used primarily as conversational search engines. The debate at this stage focused mainly on academic integrity and plagiarism. The second phase, between 2024 and 2025, brought contextual generative AI. The introduction of retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, enabled institutions to ground AI responses in verified data, reducing the problem of hallucinations and making these tools more reliable in academic settings. We are now entering the third phase, agentic AI. AI agents are already capable of executing complex sequences of tasks autonomously, planning curriculum units, and monitoring student progress in real time. This is a transformation with enormous potential, but also with risks we cannot afford to ignore. And here lies a central idea that runs through our entire research. Pedagogy must guide the use of AI, never the other way around. Technology cannot be the driver. Pedagogical intentionality must be the starting point. This idea leads us directly to the pedagogical framework we have adopted. The TPACK model, Technological Pedagogical Content Knowledge, has been the dominant reference for thinking about technology integration in education. It focuses on the intersection of content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and technological knowledge. But AI demands something more. Chilik proposes the concept of ITPAC, Intelligent TPAC, which adds a critical new dimension: ethical knowledge and algorithmic literacy as core teacher competencies. What does this mean in practice? That knowing how to use an AI tool is no longer enough. Teachers must now be capable of auditing automated logic, understanding how algorithms process information, what biases they may introduce, and whether the feedback they generate is pedagogically sound. Linked to this is the concept of digital plastic, a metaphor describing the malleable, fluid nature of AI-generated content. The teacher becomes a critical curator, transforming raw machine output into reliable instructional material. And this role is especially relevant in inclusive education, where the risks of an uncritical adoption of AI are at their highest. The question of responsibility in the use of AI in education cannot be left to chance. There is a body of normative frameworks that it is important to know. At European level, the AI Act and the European Commission's ethical guidelines on the use of AI by educators establish a risk-based framework with clear principles of transparency, data protection, fairness, and human-centered AI. In Portugal, the AI Portugal 2030 strategy positions education as the central axis of the country's digital transformation, with a strong emphasis on digital literacy and lifelong learning. In Brazil, the Ministry of Education's framework for the responsible development and use of AI in education provides concrete guidance for pedagogical practice, warning, in particular, against the risk of metacognitive laziness, the tendency to outsource critical thinking to the machine. Despite the differences in approach across these three contexts, the European one being more normative and regulatory, the Portuguese more strategic, and the Brazilian more focused on pedagogical practice, all three converge on three fundamental principles: transparency in AI use, process documentation, and critical reflection on the impact of these tools on learning. Let us now turn to the empirical component of our research. We adopted a mixed methods approach, both quantitative and qualitative, of an exploratory descriptive nature. The field of study was the Federal University of Santa Maria in Brazil. The population covered includes approximately 800 students with disabilities registered at UFSM across a diverse range of conditions: physical or motor, visual, hearing, intellectual, and multiple disabilities, as well as autism spectrum disorder, high abilities or giftedness, and fibromyalgia. Data were collected between November and December 2025 using a digital questionnaire that assessed AI awareness, frequency of use across different tool categories, and participants' ethical concerns. It is worth noting that this is a convenience sample. 45 students participated voluntarily during a period close to the Christmas and Southern Hemisphere summer holidays, which may have affected the response rate. Of the 45 participants, the majority, 51.1%, are undergraduate students. Postgraduate students account for 28.9%. Students in integrated secondary education for 11.1%, and technical course students for 8.9%. This is therefore a predominantly higher education sample, which lends particular relevance to the university context in this analysis. The findings reveal a landscape we would characterize as one of low adoption and limited awareness of AI tools specifically designed for accessibility. Almost all participants, 95.6%, have heard of AI, and 73.3% report having already used some form of AI-based tool. However, the depth of knowledge is very shallow. 57.8% rate their level as basic, and only 4.4% report having advanced knowledge. The most common uses of AI tools center on generic productivity tasks, getting answers to simple questions, searching for and summarizing articles, generating images, or creating presentations, nothing specific to accessibility. And here is the most revealing finding. Across all categories of specialized tools, tools for literature review, academic writing, data analysis, or accessible content adaptation, more than 66.7% of participants reported that they never use them or have never even heard of them. The most frequently used tools, albeit with low frequency, are Gemini for chatbots, Perplexity for literature searches, and Canva or Gamma AI for visual content. Only 5 students mentioned dedicated accessibility tools, such as Be My Eyes. And yet, here is an encouraging finding. 53.3% of participants believe that AI can offer greater autonomy and decision-making power to people with disabilities. And 55.6% consider that AI can help consolidate and deepen prior knowledge to facilitate the acquisition of more advanced learning. The potential is recognized. The practical uptake has yet to follow. What then do these data tell us? First, there is a significant implementation gap. Students with disabilities are using AI for general purposes, not as a tailored assistive resource. The tools exist, many of them freely accessible, such as Perplexity Pro, which UFSM makes available to its students, but targeted adoption for accessibility remains marginal. Second, ethical concerns are a central theme in the qualitative data. Participants expressed fears about hallucinations, content without real foundation in their own words, about the outsourcing of critical thinking, and, most significantly, about the possibility of AI amplifying the biases of developers who do not themselves have disabilities. This last concern, raised primarily by students with autism spectrum disorder, is a warning that cannot be ignored. Finally, the institutional role is unavoidable. The high frequency of responses along the lines of, "I have never reflected on this," indicates that universities need to go beyond simply providing tools. It is necessary to build a culture of critical, creative AI use, and that requires training, support structures, and clear policies aligned with Sustainable Development Goals 4 and 10. In summary, AI's potential to promote accessibility at UFSM is real and promising, but its implementation is still in its early stages. The gap between theoretical potential and practical application is considerable and demands intentional action. Our recommendations are organized around 3 axes. First, targeted training, specific programs for students and teachers focused on AI accessibility tools. Second, adoption of ethical frameworks using Brazil's MEC framework and its European equivalents to guide institutional policies and mitigate the risks of bias and metacognitive laziness. Third, and perhaps most importantly, inclusive development. People with disabilities must be co-designers of both the tools and the training programs. We cannot create accessibility solutions without the active participation of those they are meant to serve. The next concrete step, we are planning a training seminar on AI tools for students with disabilities at UFSM and a training unit aimed at professionals from the university's accessibility centers, open to academic staff as well. Thank you for your attention. We are happy to take questions and to continue this conversation, which we believe is fundamental to building a more equitable, more just, and truly inclusive education. Our contact details are on the slide. You can also find the full paper in the event proceedings. Thank you very much.